Hi, my name is Roger. I'm a compulsive debtor, and my financial sobriety date is October the 12th, 2017. Haven't borrowed 1 cent from anybody or 1 cent of unsecured debt since then. However, I first came to DA in April 2012. So I'm in Sydney, Australia, originally from the UK, but I've been here 30 years. But same group, Julian was on the last speaker, which is the Elizabeth Bay BDA Sunday morning group, which is on Zoom at the moment. I'll do a quick snapshot. I migrated from another program where I've been for 19 and a half years. And, what I didn't hear when I first came in was that credits don't transfer. I didn't hear that coming across from another program, the gaggle of sponsees and several times through the steps and loads of service positions, that I didn't just have the same thing here in this program. That was one thing. And I first came to a DA meeting, did nothing about, it's incredibly ironic. I did the reverse of what I do in the other program. I came to one meeting a week, did nothing about the steps, did nothing about service. And then I found BDA, which felt, I don't know, a little, I don't want to say rock and roll, but maybe loosey-goosey is better. But anyway, I hung out in BDA for a few years. I did a version of the steps with a sponsor. We did some versions of the steps. The bottom line is this, I wouldn't wish a rock bottom on anyone, but there was a rock bottom I needed to have in recovery, which came 7, 8 years after being in this program. And I think it's because I'd never truly done the DA steps. I'd kind of put some BDA icing over what was still a mud cake. And it wasn't until I had this rock bottom, which ended up with me in this office, which the landlords wanted back, with a company that the tax officer closed down. There was no invoices left to go out. There's no invoices coming in. There's no work. I had $20,000 racked up on my credit card. I was feeling homicidal and suicidal. It was like I was at the Alamo, picking off people who were trying to get me, if you remember that film. And I was going to one meeting a week, which then was on Skype, the unwieldy Skype. And I was sharing full of resentment on that meeting. Sitting in this office, they say, that my best thinking got me here. Well, literally, my best thinking did, in that I picked up the phone to a man and I said to him my situation. He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "No, you don't get it. I don't know what to do. This is why I'm calling you." And so I think for the first time in the 7 or 8 years I've been hanging around in this program, I did the program as laid out in literature of ours and literature that we take that from for another fellowship. I worked the steps. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. And no matter what, I did not debt one day at a time. Didn't matter how excruciating it was. And it didn't matter how or where I thought the next meal was coming from, I would not debt. And since then, I've managed, through the help of this program, my higher power, to rack up 3 years and 9 months of probably the best 3 years and 9 months getting on in my life easily. But I'm here to talk about step 6. At the end of, some people have been here since 8 o'clock this morning, 8 o'clock Sydney time. So I feel like the surgeon operating at the end of a shift, which you never want, really. And look, 6 and 7, people often say this, they're often called the forgotten steps, but I don't often hear people talk about them and refer to them as the forgotten steps. However, when I go to 6 or 7 meetings, I often hear people fumble around for something to say, whether that's because they're trying to remember what they did or didn't do. Invariably, someone will talk about a list where their sponsor got them to write down defects. For me, 6 and 7 are, these lynch. When I get to 7, it's the first time in the steps to ask God to do something. Up until this point, I've come to believe, hopefully, I've made a decision. I've shared my 5 with him, as Julian talked about. But it's in 7 that I'm going to ask God to actually do something. In fact, God to take over, really take over. And so if I've arrived at this point in 6, where I believe that, my higher power, as I choose to think of, God or whatever, is omnipotent and all-powerful and can do these things, then I know that the moment I ask God to remove the defects of character that God doesn't see serve me or my fellows, I better be sure and certain, because God's going to do that. So it's like I want to think about it long and hard, like before I'd sign a contract. In many ways, it's kind of like, I don't know, a DA prenup, you know, that. So, you know, but what actually happened was that, you know, my sponsor asked me, having, you know, spent the best part of a day going through my step 5, to go away and think about the first 5 proposals. It says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first 5 steps. Think about if there's anything I'd omitted, forgotten, left out. Most importantly, was there anything, because it talks about these defects of character, and I think that refers to the wrongs we admitted in step 5. Is there anything that I wasn't willing to take to God? We're not talking about the things that I can do for myself that God doesn't need to do. You know, there's plenty of things I know in life that I can do. That punctuality is not a defect of mine, but if it were, you know, I'm not going to lie in bed and pray for God to make me punctual. I can do that. I can get up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to be punctual today. And I probably will do for a day, maybe 2 or a week. You know, I can be hungry all I want. God's not going to shove hot dogs under the door. But it's the nature of these defects, as it says in step 5, the nature of my wrongs. And for me, the nature that underpins all these other defects, they manifest themselves. I can be intolerant. I can be opinionated. I can be judgmental. And it always makes me laugh that God hasn't seen fit to remove a lot of those. Maybe turn the dimmer switch down. But underpinning all of those, you know, is the nature of my defects, which are fear, self-centeredness, self-pity, delusion, dishonesty. You know, because I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, although I think that's a bit strong, you know, run riots. I know what a riot looks like, extreme. So, you know, it's those defects that actually do want God to do something about. So I've been trying for the best part of 60 years to do something about those with success, ever decreasing circles. So my step 6, you know, there's some words in that step. You know, it's God that's going to remove them, not my own, not my sponsor. Thank you. I hear that. Not my therapist, not my partner, not my late, you know, it's God that's going to remove them. And, you know, and I've got to be entirely ready. For me, that kind of means, I don't know, it's maybe just a whisper short of absolutely, but it's pretty close. And am I entirely ready? Well, after the rock bottom I had, you know, when someone first of all said to me, my life was unmanageable, I thought, well, that's a very polite way of describing where I'm at, you know, ready to put a gun to anyone's head, including my own. And then when someone said to me, well, there's a power that can, you know, restore your sanity, I'm not even going to balk at asking where that is. You know, when someone's throwing a lifeboat, a life belt to me, if I'm drowning, I don't say, well, who's throwing this life belt? And so by the time I get to 6, you know, do you think I want the defects removed that have been getting in my way of stopping me from being who I can possibly be and living a life where I'm not worried about where the next meal's coming from, where I'm not worried about the phone when it says no caller ID, where I'm not used to be worried about those letters that arrived that I'm sure were from the tax office or a debt collector or someone. That was no way to live. And, you know, I needed that rock bottom. Now, that's a dangerous thing to think, that we all need a rock bottom, because some of us may not get through a rock bottom. That's why I'd be loath to wish them on somebody, but I needed the rock bottom to really actively look at this program, work this program. Do you know what, most importantly though, and I don't hear it ironically talked about a lot. In my other fellowship, it's very clear what my bottom line is. I wouldn't think second about forgetting that bottom line. For me, the bottom line in this is I do not debt one day at a time. You know, I can identify as an under-earner, I can identify as a compulsive spender, I can identify many other things, but all roads for me lead back to me, coming to you, any of you, my family, my friends, who are all over my step 8 that I infected their lives with my debting. No one was untouched. And that's what I do. And when I come to you asking to borrow money, the word borrow is ludicrous. I'm saying in my head, at some level, will you give me money and please don't expect it back? You know, I probably don't even use the word please. It's you're not getting it back. You know, this program is profound in the way it's turned my life around when I simply got out of the way of God and my fellow members. You know, I can't believe the things that have happened since that rock bottom, which it was a bit like a lotto ball up until then. You know, I was, you know, kind of working this sort of business club BDA program and sort of, you know, that's not debting, is it? If I do this, that, or the other. And, you know, it's all sort of little dodges and scams and, thank you, ducking and diving and weaving that I was doing, which I don't have to do today. It gives me freedom, and I'm so grateful for it. Thank you for all who are giving service on this workshop study group today.